everyone. Welcome to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. I'm Melissa Albers.
And I'm JJ Parker. This podcast is for seekers, seekers of happiness and joy, seekers of a centered approach to success in life, seekers of their true, authentic selves.
Get ready for some real talk on everything from anxiety, emotions, and habits to love, compassion, and forgiveness. We know you'll be challenged and enlightened by this conversation. We're so glad you're here. Let's dive in. JJ, I'm very excited today because we have my friend and yours, Dr. Mary Bodvarsson.
Yes, welcome,
on
Mary.
the line to talk about sleep. So we were talking about sleep just a little bit in a couple of previous pods, and we have a lot of interest about this topic. And so I asked Mary if she would be interested in coming in and talking about it, and she graciously agreed. So Mary, welcome. Thanks for being here.
You are very welcome.
Well,
Anytime I can be announced as Dr. Mary Bodvarsson, I'll jump on it.
Well, plus I was forgetting that you are actually a what's your term? A cognitive psychologist? No. Is that right?
I'm an educational psychologist, but my focus is cognition, learning, and development.
Got it. Which is why we never say those things, because it sounds very scary.
But all
makes me feel
are impacted by sleep.
Which is a great topic.
Right. An
Melissa,
important topic.
Most, we record in the morning, and most mornings when we hop on this, you say something like, "Oh, I'm so tired," or "Oh, I didn't sleep very good last night." Almost every single one.
Do I really?
Yes.
That's because I'm in my 50s.
What does that have to do with
Oh,
how
it does.
you sleep?
Oh, it definitely does. All of the women in their 50s right now are going, "Oh, yes, it does."
Right.
Yeah, but more specifically, I think, all kidding aside, sleep is such an integral part to so many pieces of our day that we don't even think about. We don't recognize until something is in really loud cry or something breaks, right? Either we're exhausted, we lose it, or we can't make good decisions, or we feel confused, or we just feel lethargic, or whatever. And I think this is a really interesting thing to dive into just a little bit and understand the importance of sleep.
I wholly agree, which is why I agreed to join you this morning. But also, I'm just going to give a little disclaimer. The reason I feel confident to talk about sleep is when I was hired on as a psychology professor, I was assigned the task of developing a class called the Psychology of Sleeping and Dreaming. So as a result of that, I had to do a deep dive into sleep. And since I am so curious about cognition and thinking and decision-making and learning and development, I took that lens to sleep. And so that's where I really think it applies to what you guys talk about, because when we do get good sleep, we're more able to be more aware of how we're showing up, both in terms of how we make our decisions, how emotionally stable we are, how we feel physically. I mean, there's just so many impacts.
One of the things, Mary, you and I have been on a road show the last few weeks, doing some developing sessions with some groups, and this topic has been so fascinating to me specifically. And I would love for you to talk about this little piece before we delve into. You said emotions and you said learning and development, which now I understand are really two completely different parts of the brain. So I would love if you could just give that little roadmap about how all of that works in the brain, because I think that is fascinating.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is I'm a Melissa's clients through Psych 101, so to speak, because I put up a diagram of the brain. And when we are exposed to
side profile.
Yeah.
Side profile. Yeah.
Yep. And so when we are exposed to anything through any of our senses, it comes in through our brainstem. And then it travels through the middle part of our brain, which is our amygdala, which is our emotional center, and then makes it to the decision-making center, which is the prefrontal cortex. And so understanding that path, so to speak, helps us to understand what happens when we are sleeping in terms of what's going on in the brain. Because when we are sleeping, I mean, there's so many critical elements to sleep. We couldn't cover them in a whole day, but some of them are the fact that we are consolidating memories while we're sleeping. And so our brain is taking information that we gathered during the day and exposing it to historical information in our brains, meaning memories, and then making new memories and forming stronger long-term memories. But at the same time, we're also potentially, while we're sleeping, experiencing dreams. And those are really fantastical. We do things that we can't do in real life. And it's like, how do we do that? And that's from that kind of orchestra between legitimate long-term memories, new memories being formed, and the emotional center of the brain being involved as well. And so one of the things that I thought the groups really found interesting was if we wake up in the middle of the night, what's really firing on all cylinders is that emotional center of the brain, which is why when we wake up in the middle of the night and we're just all of a sudden we start catastrophizing everything that, we have upcoming the next day or something that happened that previous day. And we start thinking, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. All those sorts of thoughts are happening because it's our amygdala, our emotional center of our brain, that's really active, and our prefrontal cortex is not at that point.
Which is the logic, the logic part.
Yep. The analytical part of the brain isn't available to make sense to that unless we intentionally say that. So one of the things that I told the groups that we were working with over the last few weeks was a simple act like saying, this is my amygdala, just going crazy. I got to stop thinking about that. I mean, literally just having that sort of a thought is bringing your prefrontal cortex online. It is bringing that rational part of your brain online to say, no point thinking about that right now. There's nothing I can do about it. The best thing I can do is go back to sleep. And it sounds so simple and like that couldn't work. That actually does work because you are bringing your prefrontal cortex online.
I could make a little sign next to my bed that says, it's just my amygdala. If only I could spell amygdala.
Right.
Yeah. And Mary used the phrase amygdala hijack, which now since our road tour, I've heard that from 4 or 5 people bringing that back. They really like that phrase, amygdala hijack. And before we get off this topic, I just want to say how fascinating this is to think about, that all information is coming from the back of your brain to the middle of this feeling center, right? The part that I was so surprised to learn was how everything passes through your emotions before it goes to your logic. So, when we talk about personalities, we talk about different responses to people. We don't think we have a easy way about us sometimes of labeling more like introverts, for example, that don't show something on the outside as much as someone that does. We seem to have a very easy way of labeling them as not having feelings, right? Or what you're saying.
Right. I was going to say, which isn't really true. It's just the fact that somebody who doesn't show their emotions on the outside is still experiencing those emotions. They're just keeping a cap on the external expression of them. And so that's something that, as you know, Melissa and JJ, that comes from how we're wired. And so some of us are just wired in a way that we don't allow the external expression of those emotions, but they're still happening. And there was something else I was going to say that you triggered when you were teeing up that statement, and now I can't think of what it was, of course, but it'll come back to me.
I was curious, like, um, I feel like in society there is like a little bit of like heroism around this idea that like, oh, I got only a few hours of sleep, like it's like a badge of honor for, professionals, like, oh, I'm all, yeah, I work on Wall Street and we work, whatever, 20 hours a day and we sleep 4 and we, it's a weird, a weird construct that I've never really understood.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it's
I
certainly
agree.
some people put it as a badge of honor, the lack of sleep that they get. So what do you think drives that?
I think I'm glad you brought that up, JJ, because nothing drives me more crazy than that, because I think it stems from, the workaholism that became kind of that badge of honor that people would carry, that started probably in the 80s and 90s and whatnot. And so in order to be a workaholic, something had to give. And so then they'd say, oh, I don't need sleep and all this sort of thing. The reality of it is most adults, from early to mid 20s, all the way through the rest of their lives, need on average 8 hours of sleep a night. You would have outliers on either end of the spectrum because everything gets measured on a normal distribution. However, it's very rare to find people that truly only need 4 hours or less or 6 hours or less. And literally there's a genetic predisposition for that. So it's not something you can learn to do. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are people that truly do need 9, 10 hours of sleep a night. And again, it's a genetic predisposition. And again, they're rare, but the vast majority of us need somewhere between, and let's be kind and say 7.5 hours and 8.5 hours. But
You rebel.
I know, exactly. But it's one of those that if you see a person, you get on an airplane at 10 o'clock in the morning and you see these road warrior guys. I'm going to be sexist here for a moment. And they're the people saying they only need 4 hours of sleep, yet within seconds they're asleep. A normal adult should not fall asleep at 10 or 11 in the morning. They just shouldn't.
Right.
Relative to our circadian rhythm, that is the time where we are firing on all cylinders, is typically during the morning. Then we have our natural circadian rhythm dip in energy in the early to mid afternoon, and then our circadian rhythm brings our energy level back up until nighttime when we go to sleep. So to fall asleep that quickly at any point during the day is abnormal, and it is an indicator that a person is sleep deprived.
You know what? Speaking of circadian rhythms, I was also fascinated when you talked about this. So can you just talk a little bit about, two-part question. Can you talk about that night pattern of sleep, what's happening in that 8 hours? And then can you talk about how it relates to the circadian rhythm, like what that actually entails?
Yeah. So, one thing that I think people become fascinated to learn is the fact that we cycle through different stages of sleep during our nightly sleep period. And so for all of us, and now I'm talking about adults. So for all of us, when we fall asleep, we go through stages 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we cycle back through 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, that sort of thing. Stages 3 and 4 are called slow wave sleep. And I think the group's got a kick out of this because slow wave sleep is really that stage of sleep where we are what we would call dead asleep. So a great example of that is babies and toddlers and young adults, so teenagers, really need and get a lot of slow wave sleep, because that is when the brain is really developing and working hard to become the adult brain. And so the example I love to give is, like you put a toddler in their car seat and you just drive however far you're driving, and it doesn't matter. You get to wherever you're going, you pull the toddler out of the car and they don't wake up. they're like a bag of potatoes, and you can just throw them over your shoulder, and you think, oh my God, who can sleep this deeply? Well, they're in that slow wave sleep. So that's just part of development, that they get far more of that. They get to those stages much more quickly. We adults, we go through the lighter stages of sleep, stages 1 and 2, and then we get some slow wave sleep. And then we go back into stages 2 and 1, and then we get a little bit more slow wave sleep, but this happens during the first half of the night. Unfortunately for us, and JJ, you're lucky, you're young enough, I don't have to pick on you yet, but adult men get less and less slow wave sleep quicker than adult women. Like Melissa was talking about women in their 50s, complaining about sleep. They have hormonal reasons to be complaining about sleep. Menopause totally messes up sleep for a whole ton of different reasons. But all of us as adults get less and less of this slow wave sleep, which is this really, really, really deep sleep. And that's what makes it such that we wake up more easily at night, and we feel the aches and pains of whatever we did that day physically, all that sort of thing. So the first half of the night is dominated by these lighter stages of sleep. Then we go for this, we still get some REM sleep. So REM sleep is that dreaming sleep. We still get some of that during the first half of the night, but the second half of the night is when we're dominated by REM sleep. And people mistakenly think that REM sleep is that deep sleep. It's not. REM sleep is we're sleeping, but REM sleep is dreaming sleep. So REM sleep is when, we're having those fantastical dreams. And again, we can wake up from REM sleep fairly easily. And that's why if you do, you remember your dream. Like everybody dreams. People who think they don't dream, they do dream. They just don't wake up close enough to experiencing the dream that they remember it. But everybody dreams. And so that's what dominates the second half of the night. I do remember what I meant to say earlier was, and this is also true for what I just described in terms of the cycles of sleep, but how we sleep has an evolutionary basis. I mean, pretty much everything we do has an evolutionary basis. And so the goal is to keep us alive. So the fact that our neurotransmitters go through our emotional center before they get to the rational thinking center is to keep us alive. We need that fight or flight or freeze response to kick in automatically without having to put thought to it. And so that's why neurotransmitters go through the amygdala, the emotional center, before they get to the prefrontal cortex. Same thing is true about our stages of sleep. We have the ability to wake up from various stages of sleep more easily. And again, it's from evolutionary time is what keeps us alive. The fact that we can wake up and be alert to dangers that might be in our environment.
So when you talk about REM sleep, because that was a lot of confusion. People thought that was their deepest sleep, was REM sleep. And you debunked that and said, no, that's not true at all. But then talk about how that REM sleep changes in the morning.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Or the second half, I should say, of the sleep.
Yeah. And it's just that you have the opportunity to have more REM sleep, and then you have these dreams, and they are tying together. The dreams are really part of what is helping to consolidate those new memories. And so they are taking your experiences of today and linking them to previous experiences. And that continues through the night in terms of you just have more of that in the latter part of the night. So I don't know if I answered your question because I'm not quite sure.
No, yeah, you did. JJ, am I hijacking you?
No, you're good. You're good. Well,
the fun thing about REM sleep, okay, so you do know what REM stands for, right?
Rapid eye movement.
Yeah. So if you do look at, that's why, and again, kids as well are, having a lot, they just have more sleep. So that's where it's fun. You can look at their eyes and see the eyeballs moving underneath their eyelids. You can do that with adults too, if you just look at, at the latter part of the night. Now everybody's going to be, taking videos.
Like looking at their partner, huddled up.
Yeah.
Super
Little
creepy.
flashlight.
Yeah.
Mary, I'm more curious, like, around just some of like the stats around sleep and like cognitive performance, because like a lot of us, we have jobs where like our job is using our brain. Like,
Right.
most of my circle is not physical work, it's intellectual work. So
Mhm.
when we think about like how to be our best in an intellectual worker kind of job, like sounds like sleep's going to be a key part of that.
It is. I mean, for a number of different reasons. The main ones that come to mind is if you are well rested, meaning you got a good night's sleep, you are going to be better at, problem solving, creativity, making judgments, making good decisions. All those things are going to be better
Mm-hmm.
if you have a good night's sleep, both from the standpoint of you can process information more effectively, but at the same time, emotionally, you're going to be more stable. So, because again, getting proper sleep influences us both cognitively and emotionally to a great degree. I used to ask my students, I would say, if you're sleep deprived, you've been pulling all nighters for a few nights in a row, what's the first thing to go? And they would all, self-report, oh, my emotions. I just start, losing it with people really, really quickly. And that is what research suggests as well. So again, if we're emotionally not stable, we're also not going to make good decisions based on that as well. But the other thing that's interesting about sleep is, like going back to how you were describing, what you need to do on a regular basis, in terms of making good decisions and thinking through problems and solving things, is when we are sleeping, our brain is working to solve the problems we've been experiencing or grappling with in any given day. So it is to our benefit to sleep on it, if you will.
Yep.
If you're trying to make a really important decision, if you don't have to make it today, don't. Get a good night's sleep. Think about it the next day, and you'll potentially come at the problem with new ideas or more refined ideas and things like that, because your brain is actively working to process information and resolve things. I think I gave the example of, my husband is an outstanding piano player and just a great pianist, and he's constantly working on pretty intense pieces. And he's working on one right now that he's going to be performing in a week or so. And when he gets to an area that he's really struggling with, I can tell, not that I know anything about music, I can tell because he stops. That makes it easy for me, the novice, to figure that out. And then he'll get to that point again and stop, and he'll get to that point again and stop. And what I think he has learned just through years and years and years of playing the piano is that if he just puts it away and comes back to it the next day, all of a sudden he's just fluid working through that exact same roadblock that he had the day before. And again, it's because our brains really are working hard to resolve these roadblocks we're up against. And so that could be even in something that is considered to be, a procedural memory or a procedural task, where you're doing something, you're playing the piano, you're writing a passage, something that's more doing rather than thinking. Our brain is working on that as well.
I experience that all the time. I experience wake up in the morning, I'm like, aha, I got it. I've also heard people use a technique where they the last thing they do before they go to bed is think about or read about their problem. So is that a technique that you think actually works?
I think for each person, they have to figure out what works for them. Like for me, I don't think that would work, because then I would start obsessing over.
Same. I was thinking that same thing.
Right. But for some people it does. And there's some people who leave a notepad next to the bed. I mean, now it could be I was going to say now it could be your phone. But I would not recommend you have your phone anywhere near your bed, because if we're going to talk about good sleep hygiene, that is something that should not be in your bedroom.
Yeah. Why don't you talk about like what a good, bedtime routine might look like as you lead up to set yourself up for a great night's sleep?
Yeah. It's what we hear when the news stations decide to get obsessed over sleep and the importance of it. But it is about taking technology out of the bedroom. Our bed should be used for two things: sleeping and the other thing. And
obsessing over your problems.
right. But it really should be just used for that. And again, the purpose for that is you want to behaviorally set yourself up for success. You want your brain to look at your bed and look at it as that's the place where I just relax,
shut down and sleep.
And I sleep. Yep. So that's the number one thing, is that remove all technology, TVs, iPads, phones, anything like that from the room, primarily because the screens are going to mess you up. Just looking at a phone screen or an iPad screen or anything like that is going to mess you up. If it's one of those that can be adapted for, because maybe you use it to read a book before you go to bed, then that's fine. But you definitely want to have a consistent bedtime routine. I mean, it goes back to what we all did with our kids when they were little, whatever that routine was: bath, book, bed, whatever. We should be doing that as adults. And so that sets you up for success. The other thing is your room should be, mid-60s if possible, mid to upper 60s. You should sleep in a cooler room. It should be absolutely devoid of light. So get room darkening shades. If you don't have them.
Status.
Right,
Fruit bat
exactly.
status.
You just don't have to hang upside down by your feet. But the big thing is be consistent with your wake up time. And so if you need to wake up at, say, 6 a.m. each day, then backtrack to 10 p.m. That should be your bedtime. And stop drinking liquids earlier in the evening so that you don't have to get up as often or at all, possibly. Stop caffeine much earlier in the day. Working out early in the day rather than in the evening is generally considered to be a better thing to do, although there are some people who can work out in the evening and fall right to sleep. But so there's a number of different things, and there are some that are pretty consistently effective, but again, each individual needs to figure out what works for them. It's all the animal lovers are going to hate this next suggestion, but animals shouldn't be in the room. Melissa's making a face because she's got like 15 dogs that sleep with her. So, but
Miriam.
I was going to say, and don't nap during the day.
I was going to ask you about naps.
Well, you could. Okay, there's a couple exceptions. You shouldn't do excessive napping during the day, but a power nap is something that could be useful. And by that, what I mean by a power nap is about 20 minutes to just refresh you. And one way, if you know you're sleep deprived because you missed a good night's sleep, last night or a couple nights in a row, you could ingest some caffeine, have a cup of coffee or, a Coke or something, then go take your nap. And about the time you wake up, 20 minutes, later, the caffeine is hitting your system. So you have a double boost of energy. You not only had the refreshing nap, but you have the caffeine hitting your system.
That question comes from a guy with a hammock in his office. I find like a mid-afternoon, like at 1, 2 o'clock, even if I don't sleep, if I just hang out for 20 minutes, it's really helpful.
I wish I could do that. I cannot do that.
Well, and what you're doing, JJ, is you're honoring the dip in your circadian rhythm. So there's nothing wrong with that. And as we get older, it becomes, especially for people who are in their 70s, 80s, and beyond, napping's actually important at that point, because they're getting very little, long stretches of sleep at night for various reasons. They're not getting any slow wave sleep anymore. So they're in all the lighter stages. We just have aches and pains as we get older, our bladders to be emptied more often, that sort of thing. So we're up quite a bit at night. So for older people, napping is absolutely recommended. Yeah.
The other thing I was just going to mention too is you had mentioned it earlier in our conversation about circadian rhythms. We've been talking a little bit about that, but I also found something very interesting that you said about the circadian rhythm is actually not based on a 24-hour period. It's a longer period,
a little
which
bit
is
longer.
Which is confusing to me. That was one of the pieces that I was just curious about, and the reason I had asked you about that part was because you talked about natural dips during the day, and we always seem to associate lunchtime, right after lunchtime, as because of what we ate. And you were talking about that not in the exact same way when you were talking about sleep.
Yeah. And it is because, again, we have this natural cycle that our body goes through that is determined by hormones and neurotransmitters and a whole ton of stuff going on between our brains and our bodies. But we have this natural circadian rhythm dip in the afternoon where our energy is going to be low, not as low, hopefully, as it is at night, but low. And it just happens to coincide that in the American way of, how we go about our days, it's just after when we typically have lunch. Now, what I should have said when we were with our groups was, it does depend on what a person eats, in the sense that somebody might have, some sort of issue with a certain type of food that they're not even aware of, and that tends to take their energy level down. Or you could eat just a huge lunch of, pasta and things like that, that just also have an impact on making you tired. But for the vast majority of us, that natural dip in the afternoon is due to our circadian rhythm, not necessarily what we've eaten for lunch. Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about something very serious. I have a very serious question about sleep.
Oh,
It has to do with the waking up part of sleep and coffee. I want to talk about coffee and your thoughts on all of our favorite morning beverage.
Cheers. While we're all holding coffee cups.
We're all holding coffee cups. Yeah, Melissa, you missed this because JJ and I were bantering when you were late this morning.
Oh, I wasn't late. I was early.
In your world. But we were talking about the fact that, yes, coffee has caffeine, and that is something that what it does is caffeine blocks receptors in our brain that are our tired receptors. So that's how caffeine works. And so caffeine can help make us feel more energized. But essentially what it's doing is it's blocking adenosine from naturally leaving our system. So adenosine is a neurotransmitter, that is our make us drowsy, sleepy neurotransmitter. And as we wake up, adenosine needs time to stop having an effect on us. And it'll naturally do that. When we wake up, we're exposed to sunlight, we're exposed to, all the normal day indicators, if you will. It'll naturally dissipate in about 45 minutes to maybe an hour, and then we will be fully alert. Okay. What we do is we ingest caffeine right away. We have coffee right away, and that blocks the adenosine receptors. So caffeine helps us to feel alert, and we become addicted, either behaviorally or truly physically, to the caffeine to be that mechanism that brings us to as an alert a status as we, need and want to have. So that's what drives kind of the caffeine addiction, the coffee addiction, is that we're not letting the body naturally run its course with the orchestration between, the hormones and the neurotransmitters and all of that help to influence our sleep and wake cycles. We're pushing the envelope with our lovely coffee to have it happen as quickly as possible. But what happens is after we drink the coffee, we drink the coffee, it works. And then the adenosine receptors, all of a sudden, the caffeine leaves our system or, moves along in the path long enough that the adenosine now is activated again. It's like, oh, we're tired again. So then we get another
pot of coffee.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So it's a vicious cycle, but I do love my coffee.
Yeah. Like so much of this stuff is pretty straightforward, right? Bedtime routines, no electronics, like how to prep yourself, how to even wake up. But it's so hard to do, like.
Well, I think, I agree with you. But I think too that having a different and deeper understanding of some of the biology behind this and what's actually truth versus what the story we tell ourselves makes it easier.
Yeah.
Right. Makes it easier to go, maybe I should pay attention.
For a long time, I am a 9-10 hour sleep kind of person. That's how much, if I get 9 or 10 hours, that's like my sweet spot. If I get anything less than that, even 8, I'm tired. But I always, for a long time, kind of had a little bit of shame around, the fact that I needed so much sleep, like a baby. There's an adult baby, he needs 10 hours of sleep.
Right.
I was always the guy at the party, I gotta go to bed. It's 9:30.
I know.
Yeah, but now you're getting into that era of life that everybody be like, yeah, me too.
Yeah, right. Finally.
It's coming back, God. JJ. You're going to be cool again in about 10 years.
But I think there is a thing that we need to work on changing. Even out there are some jobs that have sleep requirements.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yes, for good reason.
For good reason, right? Like when you're a pilot, you can't just fly
traffic
all these all these kind of critical, even truck drivers, right? They have mandatory sleep windows. I kind of feel like maybe at my software companies we need to implement sleep requirements. We pay you to use your brain. It only works better with sleep. You must sleep this much at night.
Yeah.
Now that's maybe a little intrusive, but
well, you probably have a part of the population though working for you, JJ, that fall into the camp of being night owls. So yes,
I was going to ask you about that, night owls versus early birds. What is going on there?
And again, it is just a circadian rhythm difference in the sense that for night owls, you can just take the entire rhythm and just slide it, 2 to 3 hours to the right. And so their, peak time for thinking and getting things done is late morning to early afternoon. And then, maybe they have a dip in the early evening, but then they're firing on all cylinders again at 11 p.m. or midnight. So night owls, you just slide everything to the right 2 to 3 hours. Morning larks is the term for the other end, and you just slide it to the left, so many hours.
One of the fundamentals about all of running a business for me is flexible schedule. And because a long time ago, I just noticed some of my engineers were are making code in the middle of the night. Why would I make them get up at 7 a.m. if they were were clearly peaking at midnight with their work output? It doesn't matter. Come in at 11.
I can't even imagine that. I can't even.
No, not me either.
Does that whole night owl morning lark change as you get older? Because I feel like when I was younger, I was much more effective at night. And now it's morning. I can't even do anything past 7 o'clock.
That is that is pretty true for the vast majority of the population, is that as we age, our circadian rhythm slide to the left. So from that standpoint, yes, we tend to be more effective in the morning. If somebody is a true night owl, they will stay a night owl their whole lives. Like my mom passed away at 94. She didn't go to bed before 2 a.m. and you never wanted to see her before noon if possible.
Right. My mom's the exact same way.
Yeah.
Yep.
But again, those individuals are rare. The vast majority of us, our circadian rhythm slides to the left as we get older. And JJ, you've got teenagers. Your teenagers are at a stage of life that they need probably about 9 hours of sleep minimum, and their circadian rhythm has naturally trended to the right, which is why it's so hard for them to get up before 11 a.m. noon. And they really struggle to fall asleep before midnight. So, University of Minnesota is the one who did the pioneering research on adolescent sleep and found that if we pushed the start times of the high schools just to more like 8:39 even, they saw behavioral issues decline. So those emotional outbursts that those kids were having at school started declining. And they saw all the learning gains improve. So again, you saw the cognitive and the emotional effects improve because these kids could get the sleep they needed.
They did that at our school district. They flipped. It used to always be elementary started at like 9 and high school started at like 7. Well, they flipped it. So high school starts at 9 and elementary starts at 7.
Right. They did that. They did that in most of the Twin Cities school districts. They had to do it with all of them in order to be able to accommodate. But they did that because of that pioneering research done at the U.
Mary, is there anything else that we didn't ask you about that you think we should have?
The one thing that I think we should just mention as we tie this up is just, we've talked about, the decision making and the emotional benefits and pitfalls if we don't get sleep. But the other thing is the health side of it. Sleep is so important for our physical well-being. And, they do know now because of research that if we don't get enough sleep on a consistent basis, we are at a higher risk of diabetes, higher risk of heart disease, higher risk of, I gotta look at, I have notes on one of these things, but we just have a higher risk of so many physical issues that it is so important to make sleep a priority from a physical, cognitive, and an emotional standpoint. And so it is, weight gain. That was the other one. And again, this goes back to JJ. You can probably remember back to those days, when you're young and you're a programmer and all this sort of thing. If you're not getting enough sleep, do you actually reach for a nice healthy salad when the munchies hit you?
No, you reach for a 12-pack of Mountain Dew.
Yep.
Yeah, and a bag of Doritos.
Yep.
And that's the thing is that we all do that. It in our brains, if we're sleep deprived, we crave sweet and salty. We do not crave healthy. And so sleep deprivation is a precursor to weight gain as well, which again then leads to the diabetes, the heart issues, and a number of different physical ailments.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds, when we talk through it here, it is just so clear that the cornerstone of mental health, physical health,
and
happy,
wellness.
Just wellness, just being happy and well balanced starts with good sleep. Easy.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And good sleep can happen without any sort of sleep aid. The best way to get good sleep is to follow good sleep hygiene. It is not through taking sleep medications. It's not through trying, melatonin and things like that. I mean, you maybe try that a little bit. But ultimately, the best way to get good, effective sleep is through making your environment conducive to it and following a regular schedule.
How would someone get better at sleeping?
Make it a priority.
Just, yeah.
I mean, that would probably be my big thing. Make it a priority. Do the thing where you say, "Oh, it's 9:30. I gotta go." It is making it a priority and making your environment conducive to it. So,
yeah, I mean, having a conversation with your partner, like, "Hey, I really want to work on getting better sleep. How can we run our house in a way that I can do that?"
Yeah. And everybody can do this for their kids. Kids can learn good sleep hygiene at a very
the earlier the better
age.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
And when they do, they will recognize how important it is, and they will usually stick to that. I mean, they'll go through their teenage years, but then they'll go back to making it a priority. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Mary. This has been, I just love it. I love talking about this topic, and you are very knowledgeable, and you're so good at explaining some of this stuff in a layman's term. So thank you very much for hanging out with us for a little while.
You're very welcome. And for any sleep expert listening to this, just recognize I haven't been teaching this class in over 10 years. So some of my statements might have been. But ultimately, the message is
the disclaimer.
Accurate.
You just got to do the disclaimer.
I got to do the disclaimer. I was an academic.
All right. Thank you, Mary.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Did you enjoy this episode? Please go to your favorite podcast platform to subscribe, rate, and leave a review so others can discover it as well.
Growing self-awareness is a lifelong journey, and there's always further to go. And it's better when we're all in it together. Please think of someone you know who could benefit from hearing today's conversation and share this episode with them. We can't thank you enough for listening. Until next time, happy exploring, seekers.